Hello friends, and welcome once again to the Gesundheit kitchen. My name is Hans Rueffert, and we are doing a series on superfoods. So Harvard University has put out a list of the top 10 superfoods, and that term gets used quite a bit, and so we're doing a series to kind of break that term down. This may be the first one you've seen, it might be the 10th one you've seen, but welcome, and let's dive right into it. One of the ones on the list that kind of excited me the most is whole grains. And you hear that term being used a lot. It's in bread, it's in pasta. And what that essentially means, without sounding redundant, it is the entire grain. For example, brown rice is a whole grain. White rice has had some of that outer casing removed. And you'll see that a lot in a lot of these grains. But particularly for folks that are sort of GI compromised, whether you have a stomach or whether you're going through treatment, one of the things that sort of helps with digestion is having a lot of fiber. And my friend Dr. Steinberg has been with us before on the show talking about the importance of fiber, and she's going to be joining us here shortly. But fiber not only kind of helps with your bowel functions, and I hate to start any cooking segment by talking about bowel function, but more importantly, I think, or as important, is your blood sugar. And as you may have already found out in this journey, that without a stomach or with a compromised stomach and your GI kind of being a little rearranged, that your blood sugar can really be a roller coaster. So anything that kind of helps lessen those peaks and valleys and kind of help regulate that really is a great thing to try to incorporate. So I always like to try to have grains on the ready, because some of them take as much as an hour to cook as far as par cooking them. Some of them you have to soak overnight. And so I'm talking about things like quinoa, which is a very popular one at the moment, and it's high in protein. Amaranth, which is basically almost like the smaller cousin of quinoa. There's millet. There are things like I mentioned, brown rice. There's whole grain sorghum. There's spelt. There's kamut. And so that's what I'm going to do today. And what I typically do is I'll par cook the entire bag or half of the bag, and they'll hold really well in the fridge for about a week or 10 days. That way, when I'm ready to eat something, I don't have to now wait an hour to prep these grains. I can just reach in the fridge and have almost like these ready-made paints from which I can create a painting, so to speak, to use an analogy. So one of the things I like to do is start my day with whole grains, and you can always incorporate these par-cooked grains. And I'm going to stress that a couple times, because I've had people say, well, I put the barley in my pancakes and it was too crunchy. I have par-cooked these. So again, these are par-cooked grains. But again, if I'm making waffles, if I'm making pancakes, you can add a spoonful of any of the grains into your waffle or pancake batter to add that extra whole grain fiber. If you are making a salad, you can sprinkle these on top to add a little chew and a little crunch, a little protein, and again, increased fiber. But I love doing kind of a version of like an oatmeal, like a warm breakfast cereal. And it really is just a matter of assemblage. So I know I'm not great at doing recipes, but this really doesn't require much of a recipe, other than I'm taking a couple of different par cooked grains. And in this case, I'm using whole grain barley. And barley is so wonderful in any capacity. I love it in soups. It's, again, great in salads. And I'm pretty much just putting equal parts of barley. And in this case, I'm using kamut, or kamut, sometimes it's called, K-A-M-U-T. It's a whole grain. It is not gluten-free, which, if you don't have a problem with gluten, gluten gets villainized quite a bit. But honestly, unless you have a specific issue with gluten, there's no reason to avoid it. So I've got equal parts in here of barley and the kamut. And to that, I'm going to add dried fruit, as you like. I love doing craisins, but you can also use golden or traditional kind of black raisins. And I'm going to throw those in there. And I want to add these in at the beginning because I want these to kind of hydrate and get a little loose. Now, typically what I'll do is I'll let this warm up a little bit before I add my liquid. And in this case, I'm going to be using an oat milk. And really kind of depends on what you can tolerate. And that's something you kind of have to figure out on your own. I don't do well with dairy anymore, which is fairly common for post-gastrectomy patients. Some people do fine with dairy. You're trying to maximize your calories as best you can, but also you don't want to have things that are sort of trigger foods. And again, for a lot of folks that are post-gastrectomy, even post-partial gastrectomy, dairy can be a bit of a challenge. So as these alternate grain milks have been coming on the market, I've kind of followed that as well. You know, first trying soy milk and then almond milk. I've tried hemp milk. For me, oat milk works the best, but again, that really becomes a personal preference. And if you can tolerate heavy cream even, the more calories you can get in, as many of you know, that's the big challenge, is trying to get those extra calories in. So I'm going to use oat milk, but again, what I typically like to do is kind of warm this through first, and then I'll add my cold oat milk. With some of these alternate grain milks, again, they really can't handle this sort of high temperatures. And if you are using dairy, the higher the fat, the higher temperature you can take. So rather than starting with a hot liquid, I would make the grains hot, get this kind of warmed through, and then add my liquid and turn it down and let it simmer for a minute. So I am going to add my, let this warm up here a bit. I'm going to add my oat milk. And while this is taking a minute to get to know each other, we're going to spend some time with Dr. Ellen Steinberg, who I visited with at a fun little natural grocery store in Athens, Georgia, to talk about the importance of whole grains. Let's talk about whole grains, and that's something that has become my go-to in the absence of the stomach. When I sort of transitioned away from meat, I replaced that with things like quinoa and millet and spelt and amaranth. So grains have been, even though I don't think of them as a superfood in that big list initially, I thought of them, for me, it was my superfood in its versatility and its ease of, you can store it forever, they go with everything. But from the nutritionist's eye, let's talk whole grains.
My biggest, the reason why I love whole grains is its fiber. Fiber.
You are Captain Fiber.
Captain Fiber. I mean, but fiber is so underrated in terms of its benefit to the body. Not only does it help with, of course, regularity, if that is a problem, but it also can help if the opposite is a problem, because there's the soluble fibers and the insoluble fibers. So that's so important to a healthy gut. And that's something else. It feeds good bacteria in your gut. So anything that is high in fiber, always experiment with it. If you don't typically have fiber in your diet, work up to it. Don't just go full force into high fiber.
Great advice, yep.
But ease into it, and it's great for GI health.
I love it. And if you want more information on fiber, we've done a video talking about that, about probiotics and prebiotics. So that is a whole rabbit hole we can go down, but luckily we've already had that conversation. But
we have, and the thing though to keep in mind about it is people who have it perhaps want to experiment with it, as you just mentioned in a minute, like 5 different grains. So there's so many. If one doesn't agree with you or you don't like the flavor, there's so many more that you can turn to.
So Captain Fiber and I always love having a chance to spend some time together, and this is now all come together. It's nice and warm. Everybody knows each other. They've become well acclimated, and this can change every time, right? This doesn't have to be the same thing twice. So whatever you have on hand, but this is really just a nice warm way to start the day. And I like having my, I don't want to have it too soupy. I like it where the liquid just kind of holds everything together. And then I want to change some textures up in there. So I've got the dried fruit, I got the 2 different grains. I just happen to have some fresh figs that I'm going to add on here. I'm going to put just a drizzle of honey for sweetness, because why not? And again, sugar can be a touchy subject too, depending on kind of where you are in your GC journey here. So you can use stevia, you can use agave, whatever sweetener works best for you. I'm going to put a few blueberries, because why not? They're here. And we'll talk about berries on a future episode, because another one of those superfoods, and they're delicious. And then for an additional texture, and again, more whole grains, I'm going to put some granola. And granolas, there's so many varieties on there. You can put any type, any flavor. This is just a honey oat granola, but there's another whole grain. And then if you have them on hand, nuts are a great thing to add too. Things like pistachios or pecans or walnuts would be a great texture thing to add in there as well. But that is a fantastic way to start the day, or if on a late night, if you're cold and you need to warm your bones, a nice hearty whole grain cereal like this is the perfect way to kind of make sure you're meeting those nutritional quotas and keeping your stamina and your strength up. And you can feel good knowing that you're incorporating at least 2 superfoods here, but today we're focusing on the whole grains. We'll have all of the superfoods featured here in the Gesundheit kitchen, so make sure you join us for the rest of this series. And as always, take care of yourself, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Gesundheit.